Thank you so much for streaming our latest message from First Baptist Church. Here at FBC, our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. We do that by thinking big, thinking small, thinking in, and thinking out. We hope that this message helps you as you continue to grow in your faith. If you would like to stay connected to FBC, you can visit our website at fbcloyd.ca, look us up on Facebook and Instagram, or download our free mobile app. Now here's the latest from FBC. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome here this morning. Glad to see you all out. Man, we've had an awesome week here at FBC. Awesome, there's the lights, that's great. I want to be able to see you this morning. Just a little bit of foreshadowing. We've had an awesome week here at FBC. Like, we had our annual general meeting here on Monday night, and some of you were out for that. Appreciate everyone that was here. Some of you were missing, and wish you could have been here. But it was so cool. We had like 19 people that came into membership, and then which is awesome. Just watching that happen, and then also cool to be able to just talk about and have the board talk a little bit about what's going on and where we're starting to move. Directions going forward and things like that as a church. So that was really cool. And I don't know about you, but it's been kind of fun watching the hockey this week. And I'm not even an Oiler fan, but I'm willing to talk about that this morning. They're doing great, and two games against the Ducks, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and if you like Pittsburgh, they're doing really well against Washington. And yeah, and then there's the weather, right? The weather's been improving this week, and it's been cool because it's getting nice out, and I like doing stuff outside. I like to go outside and work outside. And do you like to work outside? Is there maybe anything else that you want to talk about this morning? I'm open to suggestions right now. How much do I owe you for that? All right, well, because I aim to please. We're in week 2 of a series called The Song by Kyle Idleman, and it's a song. It's a marriage about the Song of Solomon, and it's a series about marriage. And today, as a part of that, we're going to be talking about sex. And so, parents, just FYI, a little bit forewarned, there's forearmed. It's not going to be graphic or anything like that. We're not going into mechanics or things like that, but we're going to be talking about that topic. And we're going to be starting off in chapter 3. Now, if you're in a small group, we're doing this as well in our small group. So another reason to join a small group, I'd say, gives you a chance to mine this a little bit deeper and go a little further, into the discussion there. So get involved in a small group. And we're also using Kyle Idleman's sermon outlines. And so just full disclosure on that, we're following those, and we will be through the course of the series ahead. So this morning we're starting in chapter 3. And as we come into chapter 3, let me just set the stage for you there. We're not going to take the time to read it, but as we come into chapter 3, we see Solomon riding into the city in this big procession, it's full of pomp and circumstance. It's clearly a big deal. And we get the sense then that he's coming into his wedding ceremony. They're coming into the wedding. And we look around and it's going to be a production, right? It's William and Kate level. There's carriages and, everything is coming out, and all the things are done up to the nines, and away we go. And then we get to chapter 4, as it's, sort of led us to that point with this whole procession thing, and we're thinking, we're going to get into the ceremony itself. We're going to start to talk about the ceremony itself, and lo and behold, the groom comes out and says to the bride, "Oh, how beautiful you look." And then he keeps going. And so we get the impression that Well, initially it's kind of like, that sort of that private moment when she's walking down the aisle and he sees her and she comes to the front and he whispers, "You're gorgeous, you look amazing." But wait a minute. This is way beyond that. And we keep reading and it becomes clear that this isn't the ceremony at all. Solomon's gone straight to the wedding night. So we had the advance party coming in, the lead up to it, and then we skip the ceremony, we go straight to the wedding night. And we're going, wait a second, hold the phone. Kind of just slid that in there while we weren't looking, and before we know it, we're right there. So let's pick it up there in chapter 4, verses 1 to 7. Song of Solomon, chapter 4, verses 1 to 7. It'll be on the screens. If you've got it on your phones, awesome. If you want to use the Pew Bibles, it's there in front of you as well. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn, coming up from the washing. Each has a twin, not one of them is alone. Your lips are like a scarlet ribbon. Your mouth is lovely. Your temples behind your veil are like the halves of a pomegranate. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built with courses of stone. On it hang on it hang 1,000 shields, all of them the shields of warriors. Your breasts, are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Okay. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. You are altogether lovely, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Obviously, Solomon is captivated by his bride. There's no doubt. And boys, listen up here. Some of these descriptions that would seem a little strange to be using about his lovely bride, well, they're actually romantic, poetic language for how much he cares about her and how much she means to him. When Solomon says, your eyes are like doves, he doesn't mean your eyes look like a bird. He means that they're graceful and they move with beauty. And interestingly enough, back then, doves were symbolic of seduction. So he says, I'm seduced by your eyes. Then he goes on, your teeth are like a flock of sheep. And you're thinking, where does he get this stuff? Talk about a smooth operator. No, right? Okay, so you don't want to read that like, well, your teeth are like a sheep. Yep, they are. Just like a flock of sheep. You can't read it that way. He's saying, man, your teeth are amazing. They're white like sheep. Now you gotta remember again the time. It's not like they had Crest Ultra Bright, right? So she's gone to a lot of work here to be ready for this day. And he said, each one has a pair. There's not one missing. Or, they're in unison. There's not one sticking out that way. He's saying, man, you look gorgeous to me. Right? And then he goes, your temples are like the halves of pomegranates. Wow. Which isn't to say you look fruity. He's saying that your face is symmetrical, that it's balanced, it's perfect, and your skin is a beautiful color, attractive to me. So we see him talking like this, and he goes on for like 7 verses, just on and on laying this out. But then he comes to verse 8, and I love what he says in verse 8, and pay attention to that, because in verse 8 he says, "Come with me, my bride." Yeah. And we know what he's thinking. It's like, ceremony's done, dear. It's honeymoon time. Right? But pay attention. Because then he goes on, and for another 8 verses, he continues to talk about how gorgeous his wife is. He talks to her. And he doesn't stop telling her about how much he cares for her, how much she means to him. And in verse 12, note this too, that in verse 12, he describes her as a garden locked up, private and concealed. Then, after 15 verses of this, 15 verses where he's just doting on her and sharing with her his feelings and his love for her, then see how she responds. Chapter 4, verse 16. "Awake, north wind, and come, south wind," she says. "Blow on my garden, that its fragrance may spread everywhere." You know how it is, like when you drive by KFC. Okay, so bad example. But like, you know, when you come home and somebody's barbecuing in the neighborhood and that aroma is wafting over to your yard and you're inhaling it and you're starting to salivate and you know, and your head's starting to go steak, you know, oh. Well, this is the idea. She's saying, "Hey, wind, buddy's excited, but we can get him ramped up even a little higher. We can do that. So come, arousing him even more yet." Then she says this, "Let my beloved come into his garden and taste its choice fruits." Is it just me or is it getting hot in here? Oh. "Come into my garden. Let my beloved taste its choice fruits." She is as interested in this as he is. She is into this moment just like he has been, as he has demonstrated. And though we might blush, maybe this gets a little bit uncomfortable, especially when we're reading it here in front of the kids. For some of you parents. And for me. But the point is that this passage gives us some insight, some very real, some very good insight into God's perspective on marriage and sex within the confines, within the parameters of a husband and a wife in marriage. And so this morning, if you're married, as we read through this passage, it's a plumb line for where you should be in your love life. And we can look at that this morning and evaluate, how am I doing? Am I in keeping with God's perspective here on this? Or have I started to drift away from this a little bit? And if you're here this morning and you're not married, this still matters to you. It should still matter to you. Because in a culture that inundates us with all of these confusing and misconstrued views of sex, we need to come to the point where we understand this properly. That we understand it from God's perspective, what it is, where it fits, how it works. So that we don't get distracted, so that we don't buy into the false messages that we're bombarded with day in and day out. So there's 3 things this morning that we're going to look at. 3 different aspects from the Song of Solomon that God wants to tell us about sex. Things that we should know. Things for us to keep in mind. But before we dive into those 3 things, let's just stop and pray quick. Father, this morning again, we stop and we say thank you for this time together. God, thank you as well for the fact that you are so real. That you are so real. That you want to talk about every aspect of our lives. That there's not some areas that you want to sweep to the corner and just kind of ignore. But rather that this is an area that you've given to us, and that it's important for us now to understand and see how you've designed it and for the purpose that you've designed it for, and for us to understand that and then be able to apply it to our lives. So Lord, in this important topic, in this short time, would you come and would you work in our hearts and our minds? Help us to see and understand who you are through it, and then be able to apply it properly in our world so that we would be able to benefit from it as you originally intended. And I ask these things now in your name, for your sake. Amen. All right, first thing that we need to remember, we need to understand about sex is that, number one, sex is selfless. Now, I think that this is probably one of the most important things, and yet the most neglected thing that we forget to talk about concerning sex. It's probably the most important thing that we should talk about, and yet it's the most neglected thing that we don't talk about when it comes to sex. Sex is selfless. We can see from these first 15 verses of chapter 4 that Solomon didn't get through the wedding ceremony and then just cut to the chase. Like, hello, it's time to get it on. We see, first of all, that he stops and he starts to talk to his wife. They start with a conversation. And he, in that conversation, begins to tell her about how important she is to him, how much he adores her, how beautiful she is to him, how much he cares for her, and the high esteem that he holds her in. So that's where it begins, with that conversation and with him building into her world. He doesn't rush. He doesn't race to get to the main event. He paces himself. And it's clear that he's not just all about what he wants here. He's not just running for that one prize in his mind. He took his time and romanced his wife. We need to understand, when it comes to sex, sex is never about one person. It's not about the husband. It's not about the wife, solely and individually. God created sex to bring intimacy within our marriages, not to satisfy one person's wants, desires, or to make one person happy. This is probably one of the primary lies that the world is selling us day in and day out nowadays. It's one of the biggest falsehoods that Satan tries to plant and grow in our hearts and in our minds. That sex is all about you. And that sex is all for your pleasure. And that sex is all about getting what you want. Sex isn't all about you. Wrong. Sex isn't just for your pleasure. Wrong. And sex isn't all about getting what you want. Wrong. 3 strikes from the world, you're out. What happens when we buy into that message, when we buy into that false perspective, is the glorification of sex. We begin to put sex in a different context, in an improper perspective that's incorrect, and we glorify it. It starts to occupy a place in our hearts and in our minds that it was never designed to occupy. And when we do that, it results in the idolization of sex. We begin to idolize it. And we're looking for sex to accomplish something different in our lives than it's supposed to. And as we do that, it leads us towards sexual immorality and the devastation that accompanies pursuing sex in the wrong ways. The complete devastation of our emotional being as we pursue sex for all the wrong reasons and in the improper places. And all of the consequences, the carnage that comes with that. This morning we need to understand that sex was created by God for marriage. To produce intimacy within the bounds of marriage. And therefore, it's for a husband and a wife. It's between them. That's the proper perspective for marriage today. That's what we need to understand when it comes to sex. That it was created by God for marriage, to produce intimacy for a husband and a wife. Now, intimacy is accomplished when we see the husband pursuing what the wife wants, and when we find the wife pursuing what the husband wants. Sex is selfless, never selfish. And we need to understand that. Note that when the husband romances his wife passionately, and he's telling her about her beauty, he's investing in her, he's helping her to overcome her insecurities, and he's building her up so that she feels safe and secure with him, within the context that they're in, then she responds. And we need to be clear here. Understand, this is not some sort of a quid pro quo sort of an arrangement. So sort of a scenario where, well, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. That's not what's going on here. Truly pursuing the good of the other one, of the spouse, of your mate, means that the husband will serve the wife and the wife will serve her husband. We sacrifice our wants for theirs. And we pursue this with no view as to what I'm going to get out of it. With no idea of the reward that's in it for me when I do this. That needs to be true for the women as well. For your girls, just like for the guys. We don't pursue it for the reward we get. But ladies, you can't pursue it for what you're going to get out of it. Which is to say, I can get Buddy to help me out with that chore at home I've been trying to get done. Right? Or as a way to take advantage of this circumstance. There's some things that I can accomplish here. This can be a key for me to something else. A means by which. It's not a bargaining tool that you can leverage. You love him not to get something out of it, but just because you love him. And guys, you love her not to get something out of it, but just because you love her. Selflessness means not seeking a reward, but doing something with pure motives. That's love. And the thing about that is that that's the way that Christ loves us. He loves us pure and simply because he loves us, not to get something out of us. Heaven only knows we can't give anything back to him anyway. He loves us because he loves us. And so marriage is given to us as a means by which we can practice that and get better at selfless love. That's what God intends it for, so that we can become like him. And within that intimate setting, the confine of marriage, we can practice putting our spouses first, ahead of ourselves, in selfless love. Sex, then, is selfless. The next thing that we need to look at quickly is that sex is private. Notice here, when the wife responded to her husband's advances in verse 16, she called herself his. His. Personal and possessive. She belonged to him and no one else. Similarly, when he says to her in verse 9, "You have stolen my heart," it's heart, not a piece of it. It's the whole thing. She has his heart, all of it. Personal, possessive. This love was between them and them only. In some ways, I think that this is a no-brainer. But in our society, common sense has left the building. And so we have to talk about some of these things. So this morning, we need to understand that our sex lives as married couples is nobody's business but our own. It's not your mom's business. It's not your friend's business. It's between you two as a couple. Some of the best memories, some of the most important moments are going to be shared within the context of that time together. Within the confines of the intimacy of your sex life. And therefore, it has to be preserved. That's what intimacy is a private time between you two. Not something that's common knowledge. So we find then that sex builds intimacy into the marriage when it stays within the confines of the marriage. When it is something that only the two of you share together with no one else. It will build intimacy in your relationship with your spouse. It builds your connection. It draws you together in a way that nothing else in this world does. So, guys, sex isn't material for guys' night. Girls, sex life isn't material for girls' night. It's not fodder for the jokes that you make. And it's not even for poking fun at one another. It needs to be the safest place in your marriage. Because that's where you're most vulnerable. When you're open with one another at that level. Now, to hurt someone on this level is devastating. And that's why it's so important that it be kept pure and the integrity be preserved. When somebody is hurt on this level, it can tear your marriage apart. I need to just stop and talk about that a little bit because some of you have been hurt on this level. Some of you are devastated because the privacy of that part of your life has been broken. You can recover from that wound. It's extremely difficult, but you can recover. But to recover, you need to go to God. Go to Him, whether you're the offended or the offender. Go to God and ask Him to intervene in a miraculous way in your world and help to build back again the intimacy that's been lost. Don't give up. Don't throw in the towel. Don't even just suffer not addressing it for the rest of your life. Go to God. And the one that designed this for the purpose of intimacy in your life, to build your relationship together, to bring you closer to your spouse, can do that again for you. Let Him help you with that. Go to Him. And intimacy, when it's used and when it's employed properly, has the potential to weld you together stronger than ever, so that you can endure and so that you can navigate the other junk that's going to come at you in your life that you'll have to maneuver through and navigate as a couple in the regular course of day in and day out life as we know it. Intimacy can give you that bond, that solidity that can help you as a partnership, as a team, navigate the rest of life. So sex is private. We need to remember that. Lastly this morning, point 3, sex is good. Sex is good. It is. It's a gift that God has given to us. And we know that every good and perfect gift comes from God. It's good and it's perfect. And we can celebrate that fact. Look at the end of the Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 1. And this is where the people actually speak into the situation. Their friends, the observers of the wedding, speak into it. And they say this. The friends say to Solomon and his wife, "Eat, friends, and drink. Drink your fill of love." This couple, the friends knew that this couple were married. And they knew what comes now as a result of that. And they say, hey, 2 thumbs up. Enjoy it. Drink your fill of it. So we can understand this morning that God's perspective on this is that it's awesome. Have at it. Enjoy it. As much as you want. Not a problem. Now, to be clear again, this isn't a violation. This isn't that they were talking about the scenario. That's just the facts, right? When people get married, we know what happens next. Reminds me, actually, of when I was on my honeymoon, incidentally. And, no, just be careful. Hang in there with me. We were in Hawaii, and we went to this deal where they were trying to sell us, all the different packages and tours and stuff that you can go to. And there's this native Hawaiian lady there that was doing the presentation. She was probably the best salesperson I've ever run into. She was awesome. Didn't stammer, didn't stutter, nothing. She just laid it out there, and you were ready to, yep, I'll do that, yep, I'll do that, and sign up for everything. Anyways, in the course of her talk, she was talking about the fact that she was wearing a traditional mu'u. which is like a dress, right? And she said, moo-moos are like a bank. Everybody knows what's in them, you just don't know how much. I love that. I've thought about it ever since. I get a giggle about it. And this is the situation here, right? Like, I mean, people get married. We know what happens next. That's not a violation of the privacy. And these friends look at that and they say, hey guys, man, congratulations. You're married. Enjoy yourselves. Unfortunately, our world has become so polluted with these negative representations of sex out there. Right now in our world, like, I mean, sex outside of the bounds of marriage is the norm. It's common, right? Like, I mean, if you don't pursue sex outside of marriage, you're abnormal. And pornography is running rampant. It's getting worse every day. It's infiltrating even the most innocuous and innocent parts of our lives now. And sexual immorality itself invades our worlds and our homes every day by means of entertainment. And as a result of that, so often I think, especially in the church and we as Christians, we start to look at sex as a bad thing. We look at it and we just, oh, that's just dirty. And we don't want to talk about that. We avoid the subject. And our kids are getting messed up. Because they're seeing the world happen around them and they're looking at it and the world's telling them sex is awesome, go for it as often as you can with whoever you can, wherever you can, whenever you can. That's the deal, man. That's the deal. That's it right there. And we, for our part, are sitting back and we're going, oh, we just don't want to talk about it. Because it's going to be messy and it's going to have to mean that I'm going to have to talk about some stuff that's uncomfortable. That isn't the stuff that I want to talk about. That's why we have to talk about it here in church. Because sex isn't that when it's done properly. That's an abomination on what sex is. Sex is a good gift from God when used properly in the proper places with the proper people. And we need to help our kids understand that. We need to ourselves get that straight in our minds so that this other stuff doesn't creep in and begin to undermine our experience in this part of our lives. So we need to talk about it here at church. But parents, this morning, you need to talk about this with your kids. More than we even need to talk about it at your church. You need to talk about it with your kids, and I get it. It's not fun to sit down and open yourselves up and start to talk about this part of the world with your kids. It's awkward. As a friend of mine says, we need to stare awkwardness in the face and step up. And do it for their sakes. Because the world doesn't quit talking about sex. They haven't shut up yet about it. But everything that they talk about is leading us down the wrong paths. Is leading our kids in the wrong directions. Which is to say that our kids are going to be understanding sex from a perverted picture. Which will mean that as they engage in it themselves, that they're bound to fall short of what it's all about. And they will have a negative self-image as they don't measure up to the expectation that's been built in their lives as to what this is supposed to be and how it's supposed to work. And as that happens, as they're disappointed and disillusioned, then they will begin to look for alternative ways to pursue that, hoping to find that holy grail that the world is telling them is there. That's false, that's wrong, that's missing, it's completely untrue. But they will pursue it, and then they will have to endure the carnage that comes with that. We can't not talk about this. We need to sit down and give them the proper perspective. To give them the proper parameters. so that they can find and discover it for what it was built to be and what it was intended to do, and be able to experience the fulfillment, the satisfaction, and the benefits that come from it when we employ it the way that God intended it. So the truth is this morning that sex is good. It's a great gift from God. And it's there not to build our relationships on, but to build them and bond them together through intimacy. Therefore, sex needs to be a private thing that you keep between you and your wife or you and your husband. And it needs to be selfless, where we employ it as an opportunity to love like God loves us, with their interests in mind, not our own, only because we love them, not for what we get out of it. Let's pray. Father, this morning again, thank you for who you are. Thank you for this good gift that you've given us. Lord, in a world that's confused and disorientated and that's sowing false messages left, right, and center as fast as they can in this area of sex, would you come? Would you speak to us? Would you help us to bring it back into your perspective? Would you help us to put it in the proper picture, in the proper place, so that we would be one day able to enjoy that at the proper time with the proper person within the bounds of marriage? And that we would be able to see and experience the fulfillment that comes from that, and that we would be able to grow to be like you as we love one another as you love us selflessly. So to that end, God, I pray today, and I ask this again in your Son's name and for his sake. Amen.